of the Church of the Nazarene to make Christ-like disciples to the nations. It pays full-time missionaries salaries, medical, pension, housing, travel, literature in more than 90 languages, supports starting new churches around the world, global ministry centers, base support for compassionate ministries, and the Jesus Film. There's currently over 700 full-time Nazarene missionaries in 162 world areas. Some special things that are on top of that, you have the World Mission Broadcast, Deputations, Alabaster, Nazarene Compassionate Ministries, International Scholarship Funds, and Work and Witness projects. That's just a little bit of what the Church of the Nazarene does all over the world. Now I'm going to focus my comments towards Africa. In Africa, there's nearly 900 million people. The U.S. is about 300 million. 45% of them are under the age of 15. I didn't know that. 45% under the age of 15. The continent of Africa is extremely large. The continent is bigger than the USA, India, Europe, China, Argentina, New Zealand combined. I was privileged to go in October with our district superintendent, Jeff Kunzelman. And in case some of you aren't familiar, when you go on a mission trip, it's totally the responsibility of the people going to pay their own funds. No money comes from the Church of the Nazarene for people to go on mission trips or work and witness trips. Those are always self-funded. Africa is huge. I don't expect you to be able to see all this, but if you look at the colors, the light blue color at the top is Africa. The bottom color is the USA. Africa has more churches in the world than the USA. They have more total members in the Church of the Nazarene. last year, in many years, more new Nazarenes than any other country. And decisions for Christ. They have more decisions for Christ in Africa than in the USA or the other countries across the world. Malawi, the country that I was able to travel to, population about 18 million. It's a very small country. They use kwaches. So if you happen to see something about a price, it's 720 kwaches equal $1. It's a small country bordering Mozambique, Tanzania, and Zambia. 25% of their population attends high school. That's it. Just 25%. And that's mostly male that have the opportunity to attend high school. Malawi is a very, very poor country. Out of 256 countries in the world, there's only 5 that have a lower GDP. You kind of want to put that into English. What's the average earnings of a person in the country? Compare it to Haiti. Haiti's very poor. You're 5 times more likely to have AIDS if you're in Malawi than if you're in Haiti. 10% of their population has AIDS. 250 new people are infected every day with AIDS in a country of 18 million people. You'd have 30% less money if you're in Malawi than if you were in Haiti. And most of us have heard of how poor Haiti is, and we've had mission trips. You will die 3 years sooner. Average life expectancy in Malawi is 59 years. And you'll have 3 times more babies. Medical is very, very scarce. And that attributes for some of the AIDS issue, for more babies, some of the life expectancy issues. There's very, very little medical. You have an 82% less chance of being murdered in Malawi than if you were in Haiti. The crime is very, very low. It's a very safe country. The people are very kind. They're just very, very poor and laid back. When we wanted to get an inside look at the Church of the Nazarene in Malawi. We visited 3 district assemblies of the 5 in the country. We visited child development centers, schools. We wanted to identify some projects for the Northwest Ohio District. Jeff was looking for some things to bring back to the district, but he wanted to make sure that the need was there, they were legitimate, and we also were looking at ways that we could be a part of spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is, and if I look a little perplexed sometimes, my slides are moving and I'm not pushing. This is Jeff Kunselman with Wellington Obate, the missionary that was with us the whole time. We were there. We spent 9 days in Africa. And he was our host, drove us through the whole country. The first night we got there, we met with the people for the district assemblies. Paul Matumbo is clear to the right of the screen. He's a regional supervisor. The striped shirt is Joe, the president of the Bible College. The white shirt is Robert Chinua, a district superintendent. And you've got the back of Helen Obate there. Chinchinsi is the Compassionate Ministries director. Now, Jeff prayed for him, and he said, Chinchinsi, I need to convert you. And so he was successful. And Jeff wanted to make sure that I got this in a good picture, so we could do it. But Jeff was able to convert Chinchinsi, who grew up in Africa. And I'll show you another picture of Chinchinsi a little bit later, a true native Malawian, if you want to go into those words. This is the district superintendent, Quira was his last name, Gershom, his first name. They invited us into their home. I'll show you a dinner that we had when we were with them. This is Joe, president of the Bible College in Lilongwe, which is the capital city of Malawi. It's in the center of the area. I had a straw hat. I'm a melanoma survivor, so I always wear a straw hat. And Joe liked my hat. So I came home without my hat. And Joe was very proud. He said, I will not take it off. And this is Jeff in Wellington towards the end of the trip. Just kind of talking about some of the things that we wanted to do and some of the opportunities that would be presented to us. This is inside their home. This is Helen. They presented us with a gift. This is a wood carving that I have up here. This is the shape of Malawi. We basically were about a half hour from the north and about a half hour from the south of the whole country. We literally traveled the whole country as we went through. There's a large lake. We did not get to the lake. It covers about a third of the country. But Helen wanted to give us something to remember the trip to Malawi, and they presented us with the wooden plaque. And Jeff got a little tiger, something, for his grandchild. There's some pictures here. I'm just going to flip kind of quick, just to give you a quick taste of what Malawi looked like. This may make you a little dizzy, but this was a village we were driving along, and you can see for literally probably close to a mile, just little shops on the ground and clothing laid out on the ground and different vegetables, fruits type things that were out there. Condition of a lot of the buildings, you saw this. I would say 30% of the buildings we saw did not have a roof. Roofs are very expensive. Timber is the main reason, and then if you were fortunate to have some goodwill, you could put a metal roof on, but those were pretty scarce. A lot of people walk. Here's a rural well, and Dan, I am not doing anything.
It's not.
You know what?
Yeah, I don't know. It's
okay. This is a well. They told us they would guess the average person would walk about 3 miles to a well. You can see there's not many homes close to this well. You can see a few way back if you would zoom in. They carry their water for bathing, for drinking, for cooking, for any other use, for even raising some vegetables they would water, they would carry it. The women were always the ones. There's a few pictures of women carrying water. They carried it on their heads. They didn't use pots as much as they used big tubs. 5-gallon buckets and these big plastic tubs to carry the water. And so you would just see these wells in the middle of nowhere. And they'd say, well, that's probably the closest well for 5 miles. And so water is a very precious commodity there. We went to a school. The roads were horrible. We were in this car. We had driven for an hour and a half to visit this child development center. And they stopped the car. And they said, we can't go any further in the car. There was an SUV in front of us. And they said, so you and Jeff are going to have to get in the SUV because the roads are so bad, rocky, twisty, big ruts. You won't be able to make the trip in the car. And Helen, who was very outspoken, said, so why didn't you tell us the car wouldn't make it? Because you kept saying, it's not far. It's not far. And the district superintendent said, if I would have told you how far it was, you wouldn't have come. And from here, we had over an hour in the SUV to travel in. So a 2.5 hour, and they kept saying, it's not far. It's not far. And this is kind of what some of the roads look like as you're going, just kind of out through some brush. And kind of in the wilderness, if you want to call it that. Some women carrying water, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. You'd be driving to see nothing, and you might see a path, and you'd see some women with buckets of water on their head, walking down. A lot of things were carried, not a lot of vehicles. There was one main road, it was called the M1, and it goes from the southern part of Malawi clear up, and they said it ends in Cairo, Egypt. It was like an interstate highway, but you'll see some places where you wouldn't call it much of a highway. As we did, travel was pretty treacherous sometimes even there. A lot of, again, another place along fruit market or fruit vegetables. They had some apples, a lot of tomatoes, some potatoes. We call them potatoes. They had another word for them. But you can see the people were always dressed very, very nice. They had on bright clothes. They walked for miles. It was dirt paths, but they never looked dirty. Jeff and I would get out and walk from the car into a building, and we were trying to brush the dust off of us, and I don't know how they stayed as clean as they did. Just some scenes of the poor driving down the M1, their interstate, cattle or goats just walking across the road that were in your way. There weren't a lot of livestock, but there was areas where there was a fair amount of livestock. Family transportation. There weren't many gas stations, but we stopped at one, and in comes this motorcycle with mom, dad, and 2 kids on it. And they would have been very blessed because they had transportation. They had transportation. Just this is driving down a street. Not many vehicles were there. Another well, mostly women. There were at the well, collecting water, kind of a gathering point. Sometimes you would see them standing around having conversations. And, again, driving down the street, a brick wall, not much to see, kind of brush. This was the edge of a small town. This was very affluent area where this was. Not much running water. Still had to collect their water, but these houses had roofs, and they were pretty nice homes that we passed in this area. We were actually driving down a street. This is in Mozambique. We were driving down the road, no borders, whatever. He said, on this side you're in Malawi, and on this side of the street you're in Mozambique. And Jeff said, I want to go to Mozambique. So Wellington drove about a block. I don't know which direction. And this is going down a street in Mozambique, so we could say, we actually went to Mozambique. You didn't need a passport, it was kind of right there. You were going through there. And again, right along the M1 highway, a lot of cattle, goats, in different areas. You were very wealthy if you had some of these livestock. Again, another street. You can see just very poor buildings, fairly dirty, trash and debris, a lot of places. That truck probably had 30 or 40 people shoved in the back of it. Better than walking, but I'm not sure how safe it was. They were kind of hanging over all the sides, front sides and everything else, and we were going down the road. And, wow. How blessed we were being a vehicle that had doors on it. Selling some potatoes, some more little markets and stands along the road. Just little stick huts with maybe a little thatch on top. Pretty poor. You can see the roof. One house has a metal roof, the house to the right, a thatch roof that's pretty well gone. And you would see places like this as you went along the country, just a little cluster of 2, 3 to 5, maybe 10 places together. And they make their own bricks out of mud. They would take the bricks, put them into a mold, let them dry, and then they would put them in the ground and build a fire over them to try to make them hard by heating them up. So there was a lot of brick, but the brick wasn't durable like in the U.S. where it lasts for 50 to 100 years. You might get 20 years out of some of them if they weren't fired correctly. Just another scene, a few houses there, had some metal in there. As we were driving through the country, we spent hours in this car, going across the country for the district assemblies and the child development centers. Jeff and I soon realized that we shouldn't drink a lot of water, and we shouldn't eat because it might be 3 hours or 4 before there was a bathroom. And Wellington would say, now, guys, if you're going to need a bathroom, there'll be one in about an hour and a half up the road here. He said, because I know where the good ones are. This was the nicest one that we saw. And so we didn't really want to know what some of the others were. But we learned very quickly we didn't eat a lot and we didn't drink a lot when we were in the car. So we kind of went. Look at this one. This was another one. They were very, very proud of this. It was a new one that they had. And they said, we keep it clean. And this was outside one of the churches that we were at. Okay, we saw these kids standing along the side of the road with these things in their hands, and we're like, what's that? What's that? He said, oh, they're mice. And we said, well, we want a picture of it. He said, well, you can't. They won't let you take a picture. They don't want you to take your picture. I said, well, what do you do with them? He said, oh, you eat them. We're like, now, come on, really, what do you do with them? So finally we said, we want a picture. And he said, well, they won't let you take a picture. So Jeff says, let's just buy some. So we paid 60 cents American money equivalent to buy 6 mice. So about 10 cents a piece. Kind of, those of you that are older might remember you used to get a candy bar for a dime. So you get a treat. Well, hopefully this progresses. Chinchinci talked to him and got the mice. And Chinchinci grew up. His father was a pastor, very, very poor. He's Compassionate Ministries Director in Africa. And he talked to him and he got him, so he's got these mice. We didn't tell him to do this.
So this is the mother, and I think the father ran away because they were supposed to be big grown-ups.
So he said, I think the father ran away because there should be 2 big grown-ups and then they put the whole family on a skewer. Now, oftentimes they will roast them over a fire. These had been boiled. He said they catch them. And the interesting thing, we said, now, how do you catch mice? And he said, you're real careful. He said, you build a little fire in the brush, and the mice run out, and you grab them by the tail. He said, if you don't grab them by the tail, you will get bit. And he says, so you learn very quickly, grab them by the tail, and then you take and you drop them into boiling water. And once they're cooked, then you stick them on the skewer, and we might see a half a dozen, 6, 8 boys standing along the side of the road, usually young boys, maybe from 10, 12 years old. And they would have 4 or 5 skewers in each hand, and they'd be standing out there. The one time we saw, and he said, I think those are bats that they had on a skewer, but we didn't actually see that very often. But the mice was very prevalent, no matter where we went, north and south of the country. We saw the mice on the skewer. And interesting enough, when we just wanted them, so we took that, and Jeff and I are kind of sitting in the back, and we're just kind of feeling a little queasy. So Jeff says, let us just stick those clear in the back of the SUV, on top of our luggage in the back. So we did. We got ready to leave that night and dropped Chinchinci off, and he said, he went to the back, he grabbed the mice. And I said, can you wait a minute? He said, do you want them? I said, oh no, I just want another picture. And that was actually the first picture that I could get a little bit of light on it. And he said, my family doesn't eat them because they were never as poor as I was, but I eat them. And I said, Chinchinci, so did you eat a lot of mice when you were growing up? And he said, well, I never got a whole one. I had to share it. And then I asked the question, so why did you eat mice? And he said, well, Larry, we eat sema, which is a white corn flour. It's a white corn. They grind it up, and they just make like a cornmeal out of it. He said, you add water and maybe a little bit of sugar, and it makes like an oatmeal porridge. Or you can boil it, and it kind of turns into what looks like a mashed potato pizza dough. It's just a little clumpy. He said, when you've had nothing but sema for 2 or 3 months, a mouse is a very nice treat. I'm serious. If that doesn't touch you. And he said, did you eat a lot? He said, no, I had to share them. That's all we could have. But he said, I learned to like them. I like them. We saw this, and I wasn't sure if it was Kentucky Fried Critters. But they had just built this new, we're back in the capital city of Lilongwe, and it wasn't chicken. He said it was quite attended by some of the well-to-do people. the average Malawian would never be able to eat there. The average Malawian, well, the average income, this takes the wealthy to the poor, is $900 a year, $75 a month. He said a very well-paid pastor would make $40 a month. Very, very well paid in the big church. He said if you go to Kentucky Fried Chicken or you want a pizza, it's going to be $7 or $8 equivalent. He said for that $7 or $8 you can buy enough semen to feed your family for a month. He said, where do you think they're going to go? Because he said the average Malawian won't make $40 a month. You've got those that are very well off, and you've got those that barely have anything. We went to a child development center. This was in Zakuma. This was on the road, not far, but it was 2.5 hours of treacherous travel to get there. When we got there, the kids were just astounded. We were told, you're probably the first white people they've ever seen, because this is very, very remote. People just don't go there. We understood why after we got there, because it's so hard to get there. And so the kids had waited for several hours because it took us so long to get there. School kids, about 300 kids attend this school child development center. Jeff got down, and most of them understand English. Most of them speak English. English is the official language in the country of Malawi. All the road signs are in English. All the government documents are in English. But they speak Chua. We called it Chichua, but it's a dialect that we couldn't understand. And some don't speak English, but they gave us a chicken. It's hard to see, but this guy has a chicken. They were so moved and honored that we would come there. And Jeff was quite a dignitary, being a district superintendent, that they wanted to give us a gift, so they had this chicken. Now, we're 20 hours on a plane ride from home. It's not like what they get into a chicken. And Wellington said, this is an honor. You know. So we had him give it to the district superintendent, Robert Chinua, and he said, I'll take it for him. So they were very pleased and honored to give us this chicken. So we had to make this trip back with a chicken. They had their rules posted. Apparently can't read, but number 8 says, throwing of litter anyhow is not encouraged. Late coming to school is punishable by law. Number 1. And they had their rules put up there, and they talked in English, but their English wasn't quite as smooth sometimes as you would be familiar with. The school, this is some stats. They currently had 69 students per teacher. If you look on the bottom, they were up to 94 students per teacher at one time. So all these kids come, they would give them a little bit of SEMA to eat, and that's when their attendance and their dropout rate and their learning rate improved, when they give them a little something to eat. Some of these kids had a little cut. We asked the question, well, some of them had this look like runny oatmeal. And said, well, not all. They said, well, most of them ate, but some of them are saving some to take home because their siblings at home that don't have anything to eat. So for the day, you get your cup of SEMA, and you're going to save some of it and take it home. This was inside the classroom. All the pews, they were more like pews than chairs, were outside because they were all sitting out in the courtyard waiting for us to arrive for hours. This is inside. This is some white corn that they would make SEMA and also use a little bit of it to feed a few of the chickens that they have. That is all the books they had for the school. Only the teachers are allowed to have books. Students don't. Some of them are in Chua language. Some of them are in English. But they do teach everybody English. The storm had come through and blew part of the roof off of the school. And they said, well, when it rains, we just get wet. We don't have money to fix it. So there was part of the metal that was kind of crinkled from the storm. We went to another child development center. Cody, I think. There was about 40-some children there on a Saturday. And we had taken some shoes. Jeff had taken some, these are called the shoe that grows. We had taken 100 pair. This shoe can move 5 shoe sizes with the Velcro and the pins in there. So a child can use it for 5 years. And there was a smaller size for small children than this size, and we had taken. And to get these to Africa is going to cost about $20 a pair. Many, many people, children especially, don't have shoes. We'd see them. You can see from the distance, sometimes we show the pictures of the children, they're barefoot. They get a lot of disease and infection by being barefoot in the soil and walking over brush and different things like that. So we stopped at this school. They put on a presentation for us. They were very well dressed, very well behaved. They did scripture verse, sang some songs. We took shoes, about 45 pair of shoes, enough for everyone that was there. Laid them out. Pictures are kind of dark. And they waited one by one until their name was called to go over and get the shoes. There's a little boy that still on the line.
Let's go back. Go back.
Can you back up a couple, Dan? Yeah. Right there, this little boy was holding a pair of shoes. And they were all saying thank you, and just so moved. This was outside. They wanted a picture with us in the courtyard. The interesting thing, the next day, we had went to a different church. You'll see that in a second. Wellington got a phone call. Well, yeah. We're just here on the one side. He said, well, Jeff, Larry, you know where we were yesterday? We passed out shoes. They usually have about 100 that show up on Sunday. We were there on a Saturday. He said, this morning 300 children showed up with their families because they heard missionaries had shoes. There were so many people they couldn't get it into the church. They had to hold the church out in this, it was kind of a big courtyard where they were. He said they heard missionaries were there with shoes. And 300 children showed up. We were thankful we weren't there with 45 pairs of shoes and 300 children that day. How would you deal with that? So we went to another. This was a very high-end school, Nazarene school. I want you to look at the classroom, the condition of the classroom. Now, they usually wouldn't have that many children in it, but they all come into one classroom for us that day. And this was some of their work. If you can see any of that, unless you're a really good algebra student or mathematician, you probably wouldn't be able to figure out how to do that. They had the quadratic equation up on one of the boards, and they were factoring it or whatever you do with that anymore. It's been almost 50 years, so I can't remember. Here's what it cost for a semester, a 9-week period. 41,000 kwacha, which is about $60. Okay? A well-paid pastor makes $40 a month. For one child, it's $60 for the 9 week, 10 weeks, whatever they're doing. And then you have to wear uniforms. It costs another $30. Now, you don't have to buy the uniforms every time. The other school made you wear uniforms Monday and Tuesday, and the paper on the rules said, you don't wear uniforms on Wednesdays for washing, and then you wear them again Thursday and Friday. Because you don't have 2 sets of uniforms, you have 1. But this was a very high-end school. I think they said there were about 700 kids that, through all the grades, that attended this school where we were in Bangui. We went to 3 district assemblies. Culture is quite different. If you notice, this was in the north, There are men and women sitting together. Everyone has a chair. They get involved in their worship. This was in the South. Only the men could sit in a chair. A woman was not allowed to have a chair unless all the men had a chair first. The men and women did not mingle. These district assemblies started at 9 and went to 2, 2:30, 3 o'clock. There were no breaks. There were no bathroom breaks. There were no lunch breaks. There was nothing. It just went and started and continued on. This was this old guy, I don't know how old he was. This was the offering they gave for the DS. Somebody brought him some eggs, which was very coveted. And most of those would have been 100 kwacha, which is about 70 cents. Those that were in there. Even, this is the lunch line. Afterwards, you notice the women all on one side, the men on another side. The middle pot has the white sema in it. That's what they had for lunch, sema. They were able to take a plate, get some of this. Was more of the doughy, mashed potato type consistency. The pastor at this church was found out I was in agriculture and wanted to show me his poultry farm. So he had these chickens, most of them were layers. And he said, we can sell some eggs, we can eat some eggs, and we can get enough money from selling the eggs to buy enough feed to eat some eggs and sell some eggs. This was how he got around to his churches, but his motorcycle was broken. So he said, I have to use these bicycles. He said, sometimes I'll ride all day to get to see some of our people. And, this was at the district superintendent's house. This was the lunch they gave us. We had some rice and vegetables. I think in that middle blue bowl was some goat meat or something. I chose to just have the vegetables with the rice. I kind of have this thing, if I can't identify it, I don't eat it. And I'm not one of these, somebody says, well, how'd that taste? And then they tell you what it is. So, but they were very, very honored that we would come to their house after this district assembly and have lunch with them. And this was his television, his big speaker, and a couple of computer towers at the district office superintendent's house that the district had. We went to another church. This is in the Central Region, Bangui, Church of the Nazarene for the 3rd District Assembly. Very, very nice church. Much more modern. Had wooden pews. In this one, men and women were able to interchange between them. They could sit together. Everybody had a seat. Wasn't quite as well attended as a couple of the others. Matumbo in the center there was preaching, very dynamic preaching. This was where we went to church on Sunday. They had a little school in the back. This was inside the church. Before we had our service, they pulled the pews out for us. Men sang. See if you know the song. This was a church we stopped, Nazarene Church. This pastor had been there for 50 years. Look at the condition of the roof. This is the front of the church. He said, my attendance is dropping. When it rains, people get wet. It's a mud floor. And he said, I'd like to have a new church or get this church fixed so that a younger pastor would come and take over. He's been pastor there for 50 years. Here's the pews. So sit back and be comfortable here. That was the pews. And of course, the posts, the trees are holding up what roof there was. This is the Nazarene Seminary in the capital city of Illinois. And Joe and Jeff. The seminary students cost $500 a year for seminary there. They live there. That includes room and board. And usually without a sponsor, they can't afford to be there. So, the children, most of you know the statistics are the same in the U.S. If they can come to meet Christ as a child, they have much more likelihood that they will have a relationship than if they wait till they're in older years. And so we were really touched by some of the children. And the hunger and the look in their eyes as they, not in his eyes, he was the most comfortable of them all. They just looked in amazement for things that we take so granted every day. They'll never know. They'll never experience. Some of them may never experience a pair of shoes. They won't know what it's like to eat anything other than corn flour, sugar, maybe a mouse, if they're lucky. The Church of the Nazarene, Northwest Ohio, and Jeff want to be a part of reaching the whole world. Jeff's got some projects he's trying to work on, whether it's shoes. If you say, well, I can't do a lot. $20 to put a kid in shoes for 5 years. Is that not a lot? It is to him. Sitting in a church with water coming down while you're sitting on a mud pew. I was touched. Most people say I don't get touched very often. We've been so blessed. But the need is so great. And I was honored and privileged and just so humbled to be there and to see some of it firsthand. And the children. The people were so gracious. They weren't begging for money. They weren't asking. This is how Dr. Tumbo said, Jeff and Larry came. They have given to missions. They have prayed for missions. And now they want to see for their own selves what the needs are. So they can go back and tell the church and tell the people around the world, here's the need we have seen. We want to be a part.